in your seat.
Behaviour in the classroom was already high on the government's agenda when Channel 5 broadcast Classroom Chaos earlier this year. Hidden cameras followed a supply teacher. Pupils' faces had to be blurred.
What are you doing?
The report gave ammunition to those demanding tough action. Soon after, Ruth Kelly set up a working group to recommend solutions which could be applied in all schools.
Boys, can you turn round? Boys, can you turn round and face the front?
In this film, we find out from 5 head teachers about the real state of school behaviour in Britain today. And we look at the different ways they are tackling the problem. At Teddington School in Middlesex, the staff believe behaviour is getting worse.
Well, I've been teaching for 29 years. There has been a significant shift over that period of time, but perhaps more latterly, in the last 5 to 10 years, I think, students are much more challenging in school than they used to be. There seems to be a general lack of respect for people in positions of authority.
That's a view shared by teachers at Southfields Community College in South London.
I think in recent years the levels of behaviour have deteriorated, but not to the level of violent behaviour, but more so low-level disruption in the classrooms. Children who shout out a turn, who get out of their seat and might wander around the classroom, who might start cussing one another, students, and then the teacher has to deal with that. And this could all be happening at the same time.
But how widespread is bad behaviour? Geoff Moss is a former teacher and educational psychologist who now spends all his time in schools training teachers.
In many a class, if we become invisible, what we seem to see, often see, are things that head teachers never see. That's kids jumping on tables, throwing books, shouting abuse at teachers, and sometimes it feels very uncomfortable in those classes. That's probably still a minority of classes, but for those teachers who are experiencing it, it's an awful, stressful experience for them. And for the kids in those classes, there's not a lot of learning taking place.
If behaviour is getting worse, why? Many educationalists and teachers believe the key lies in changes in society and the way in which children now relate to all adults, teachers and parents.
Parents find it difficult to be parents, I think. They don't want to stop them going out, and they want to try and meet them halfway, and whether it can work with some, it doesn't work with others. I think society, the media, influencing them. I mean, for my boys particularly, you know, they're very media aware. They want to be cool, they want to, you know, wear the correct clothes and to be seen to be cool, and it's actually not cool to achieve amongst these boys, really.
The distinction between childhood and adulthood is becoming blurred. What children witness now, not just on the Game Boy and the like, but also the mainstream television, is a world of adults which are very often less than, I suppose, positive models for them. We see the celebrity culture with adults who behave in very immature ways, who are attention-seeking, very egocentric, actually where education isn't much valued, where learning certainly doesn't come to the fore.
Teddington School is running a new project for a group of Year 10 boys with a history of bad behaviour. The man in charge has a no-nonsense approach to poor behaviour.
You're going to start off in the tank first of all, where again you're going to be right off. We're going to be practicing some of the skills you've learnt before, okay? Yeah. In an orderly fashion. Yes, you can leave your bags here because it will be locked up. Okay.
Wayne Simon is a sports psychologist. He's running the Self-Esteem Through Sport project. The Teddington boys spend half a day a week learning to row.
Think about what you're doing.
The aim is to change the behaviour of boys who've been in trouble since Year 7.
What sort of bad behaviour were they typically getting up to?
Just rude and challenging, really, to staff at school. Lots of them really not interested in the academic side. of school, and because of that, they do have difficulties in the classroom. They can't access all of the work all of the time, and because of that, then there's behavioural problems that are linked to it.
And they're getting lots of detentions and punishments.
Lots of detentions for not handing in homework. Then they don't go to the detention, then it becomes bigger, it escalates into a department detention. They don't go to that, it becomes a leadership team, and so the whole thing just kind of snowballs, really. And that was happening regularly, and often leading to internal exclusions where they sit down the head's corridor, and work is sent down there for them for the day.
Right to go right. Yep, that one to go the other way. You're in control, you're the cox, you're the main man. Ross, Zach, remember who's in charge of this boat? Okay. He is, because you can't see where you're going, he's the one who's going to tell you what to do. Generally speaking, most of these young men, the only attachment they feel is to the pack, and that can be quite negative in school and out of school. So what we've tried to do, what we have achieved, is getting them to feel part of a team. The rowing gives them a sense of achievement, it gives them a sense of attachment, and their attitude has to change. Because they have to behave correctly, they have to follow instructions on the water, and they know that if they don't work together, hence the change of attitude, nothing will work. When they've achieved something, you could see them physically feel better. They stand taller.
I think what the programme does is to allow us to spend more time with individual students, learning more about them, learning more about their needs. So to be off the school site, in a small group, engaging in activities where they have an interest, and more particularly they have a talent and they can be successful, that has a positive effect on their whole attitude towards education in general.
Remember, if you put your blades flat on the water, that stops it. Keep it flat. That's good, and nice and flat. Right, and flat, and stop. That's it. Nice and steady. Good. From an early age, we teach our children how to behave properly. We teach them which knife and fork to use. And a lot of people say, when they come into the classroom situation, especially at Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, they should know how to behave. Of course they should do. But if they don't know the basics, we are responsible.
At Ninestyles in Birmingham, they believe a clear, consistent approach to discipline within the school can change the behaviour of students. In the past, many would have been left to drift out of the system.
I think it's far too simple to say behaviour is getting worse. The issue is a much more complex one. We now are trying to address the educational needs of 100% of our students. In the past, we were all quite happy to write off a percentage of our students, perhaps as many 20 or 30% of our students.
Ninestyles' answer is a whole school approach. Behaviour for Learning was introduced by Sir Dexter Hutt, now Executive Head, and has been praised by many politicians, including the Prime Minister. It's based on a system of consequences, starting with a verbal warning and culminating in a 6-hour stint in the isolation room. Today, there are 5 students, a typical day. Kelly, from Year 9, is a frequent offender, who in the past would have been written off by the school.
It's horrible, just sitting there and boring. You're just working, they give you some work, and they've got these little desks, and you can't see the person next to you, and you just sit there, do some work, and then at dinner time, because breakfast, you don't get breakfast in there, and then when it comes to dinner time, you get to have a sandwich, and then you just get on with some more work, and then go at the end of the day.
The isolation room is a pretty extreme measure. Do you think it's an appropriate measure?
It's an appropriate measure, and I would disagree that it's extreme. It ensures that students stay in school, it ensures that they are continuing to do work, but at the same time it makes them very clear about the consequences of their poor behaviour. And whereas they're normally allowed to be with their friends in lessons and around school, because of their poor behaviour in lessons, they're withdrawn from that lesson for a day where they have to work on their own.
3 to, and consequences then to the following people. So have you all looking this way, headphones off, thank you. Still waiting for one young man.
Notices spell out the consequences. A C1 is a verbal warning, a C2 a second warning, and a C3 an hour's detention. Another telling off leads to a C4, isolation.
When you first came to the school and you saw the isolation room, what did you think?
I thought that it worked. I certainly went in there and felt that children, there was a mystique about isolation around the school. Children do not want to go there. It's only a minority that ever end up there.
Did you never think, gosh, this is a bit brutal?
No, because I think as a teacher, and you're dealing in the classroom, and you're hands-on with children, when people step 4 chances they've got before they end up in isolation, that's 4 times they've stopped learning. I mean, that is pretty significant in itself as a teacher, and I never felt it was brutal. Just stop there for me, just going to have little bits of it, okay? The system of consequences for me just allows me to teach. What it does is it stops very low-level behaviour. It's those things that drain teachers. When you're trying to talk to a class, stop that, don't do that, please. It just stops that because people know exactly where they stand. Why do children misbehave? I think it could be a combination of factors. They might be bored, it might be too hot, it might be that they're not engaged, that it's not relevant to them. It might be, for example, they've had a poor experience at home the night before, they've got problems at home, it might be they've come from a lesson where they haven't had a good time, it may have been a problem in the playground. There could be 101 reasons why children misbehave. I think generally, I have to say, in my own lessons, when it does infrequently happen, it's if I'm perhaps, if I'm honest, not as planned or prepared as I could have been. Right, easy one. Was she using her left hand? Did you hear her using her left hand? You need to listen more carefully. She was using her left hand. It's because you were nodding off there. Right? Next time I'm going to give you a consequence.
Although the Ninestyles approach has been widely copied, critics doubt whether on its own it can work for all children.
Until, I suppose, fairly recently, very often many of the traditional approaches to, quote, discipline worked, certainly for most children. It probably still works for a majority of children, actually, but it doesn't work for the vulnerable children. Traditional approaches of telling don't work. Telling isn't teaching. When I'm teaching, I'm getting into an approach where I am very carefully modelling, instructing, supporting that behaviour.
At Drayton School in Banbury, they've introduced a system which they believe is better suited to that vulnerable minority. Restorative justice, known as RJ, doesn't deal in instant punishments or consequences. It's based around a conference in which pupils are encouraged to think about and change their behaviour.
On arrival at the school, I was struck by the low-level aggression between children and staff, partly because of some of the punitive approaches that had been taken under the old history of the school. They didn't have the language, they didn't have the understanding about how to deal with conflict or tension in ways other than using aggression.
That's my suspicions, but no one is owning up to anything.
Earlier this year, Teachers TV filmed RJ in action here at Drayton School. After a spitting incident, a conference was held to find out what had happened, who was affected, and how things could be put right.
Okay, so I would quite like people to be quite honest at this point.
I did some of it.
Thank you. You haven't done any of it?
Some of it. Yeah.
No, thank you, Luke, for being honest.
Someone was chucking at me as well.
Right, this is what we need to get to the bottom of. Anybody else want to line up?
He does.
Thank you. Matthew?
I ain't got.
You haven't. Jade? No. Orion?
No.
Right, okay, so the rest of you, okay, I'd like you to go back into the class. I'm going to come and see that you've settled. So, do you have any idea how you've just affected that class?
We got all over it.
Okay. So who's been affected now?
The classroom.
Yeah, anybody else?
Teacher, pupils. Mark.
Okay, Mark. So what can we do now? What's the fair or the right thing to do now to get this sorted? Because you've got choices to make, haven't you? And Luke, you've got serious choices to make. Okay, you've just come back in, haven't you? And Matthew, you need to really start making the right choices. Because there's only so much a school will tolerate. And you actually have completely disrupted the learning of that whole class.
The results of this kind of work are not always immediate. But how effective is RJ in changing behaviour in the longer term?
You've got to keep saying to yourself, this isn't a magic bullet, this isn't magic dust. And sometimes progress is about a particular child with challenging behaviours having fewer offences, or gradually less serious ones, or different ones, and that actually that's still progress.
Older pupils at Drayton say that RJ has helped them to change their behaviour.
You can't actually change as people, because in year 7, year 8, I was like really loud, really like in people's faces, and if I didn't like somebody then I'd tell them, and I'd be really quite rude and really, really loud. But then after doing the restorative justice, it sort of matures people. People start to think actually...
Makes you think more grown up.
Yeah, you think about the consequences of what you're going to say and what you're going to do and how it should affect other people.
A lot of people say it's a pink and fluffy option, but actually it isn't. What you're actually asking the child to do for the first time is to take into account what they've done and become responsible.
Many educationalists believe that the kind of behaviour which is causing problems in secondary schools should have been caught much earlier.
I think for primary schools, of course, it's becoming an increasing problem where we're taking children into our schools there who've had all sorts of, well, sometimes bizarre, but sometimes certainly not structured experiences in their infancy, so that they know how to communicate reasonably with other people, they know how to share, take turns, etc. So primary teachers are aware they've got that job to do. It's a developmental process for them. They're taking children from almost, as I've said, like feral states to become more socialised individuals. And often then the teacher is almost becoming a counterculture to the child's experiences elsewhere.
Dyffryn Infants in Newport, within the most socially deprived catchment area in Wales, is identifying these children at an early age, and through a nurture group working with them to improve their behaviour.
A child behaves badly because very often they have no sense of themselves, no sense of worth, no self-esteem. They have to feel secure to be able to behave.
Eggy bread. Yeah, pass them round. There we are.
Around a dozen children of varying ages are taken out of mainstream classes for up to a year and are taught in a specially adapted classroom.
Yes. Thank you. That does look good, doesn't it?
We eat together, we have breakfast together every morning, so that it's a good social atmosphere. It's an important nurturing aspect to eat and drink together, and they feel safe when they come to us. We're like a little family here.
Don't forget to say thank you. Good boy, thank you. There you go. Are you having eggy bread? Anybody else waiting for toast? What would you like, Nick? Can you pass it round, Alicia, please? Right, we sit down. Look what I brought in today. What's in the paper today? Let's see what's in the paper, what's been happening.
There's an emphasis on speaking and listening and putting feelings into words.
Somebody had been walking in the woods and they thought they had seen a big black panther. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Well, they are
I
back.
remember.
Yeah, and it was on all the TV as well. Well, they're back in the paper again.
There's the man, he said, oh, I did take the picture. And there it is. He thinks it's a big black panther.
Shiny. Some people thought it was a dog, didn't they?
Some
They said,
people
"I think
still
it's a
don't
dog."
believe it. Do you know what?
We do a lot of work on confidence with these children, and our aim is to improve their confidence and self-esteem so much that they are able to go back into a mainstream class and to hold their own. Good girl, what words have you written? It's good girl, thank you.
The school believes that by teaching these children how to behave, they're preventing them from becoming the troublemakers of tomorrow.
Usually when children are badly behaved, it's an expression of some problems that they have, and so when they come to us we can give them more room to express themselves and work through what the problems are with them, and so it doesn't come out as bad behaviour then. They can manage their behaviour a lot better.
If this nurturing isn't taking place at primary school, then our vulnerable children are at risk of educational failure. They're the kids who are getting into trouble, who are being sent to the head, whose parents are receiving notes telling them how naughty their children are. By the time they leave primary school, they and their parents have more or less learned that education isn't for them, schools are not for them. They go into secondary school armed to the teeth with all their defiance, with all their belief systems that tell them that teachers are the enemy, school's a waste of time, you just have to put up with it, otherwise you get taken to court, but if you can avoid it, do so.
The boys from Tennington School are clearly typical of pupils whose behaviour was not addressed at an early age. Now that the Self-Esteem Through Sport project is coming to an end, how successful has it been in modifying their behaviour?
I think all the children have benefited in some way, but unequivocally there is one student, Ross, who has just surpassed our expectations. A year ago, I was spending a lot of time with Ross and his parents and making statements like, I'm not sure what else we can do for Ross in this school. He will not cooperate, he will not behave, he will not respect teachers. During the course of the programme, we have seen an unbelievable change in Ross's attitude. Ross is your likeable rogue, and he's good fun to be around when he's at his best, but he's pretty awful, or was pretty awful, when he was at his worst. And I was at the point where I was considering permanently excluding him.
Well, year 7, I was pretty good until I met half of these lot in year 8. We all started mucking about, getting in trouble, getting suspended and just causing havoc really for the head teacher.
What kind of things did you get up to?
I don't know, kind of childish, be running around corridors, jumping into other pupils, just general child behaviour really.
So you weren't bothered about the effect you were having on other students?
No, because I didn't really see it like that. I didn't see my behaviour affecting their education.
You're rushing it, guys. Hands closer together, please. Come on.
He used to have detentions galore. He wouldn't go to the detentions, and he would then have a double detention and a head of year detention and a headmaster's detention. None of that happens now, and he used to be internally excluded from school on a regular basis, probably once if not twice a week, and he has, I think, probably had 2 internal exclusions in the past term.
So why do you think your attitude's changed?
Well, Wayne, he is quite a big impact. The first day I had a chat with him, and he was like a very strict person, but he was really down to earth. Like, you could actually speak to him as how you'd speak to one of your mates, like you could relate to him. So yeah, it was really quite good meeting Wayne. He's helped a lot.
Squeeze. And squeeze, good. And squeeze.
It's given him a focus in life, and it's allowed him to think more about what he can achieve and what he might do with his future. So I think he's gone from a point where he was living for the day and couldn't have given a thought about his future. He now thinks, well, I'm pretty good at that, I've done that, that's been successful, I could perhaps do this in the future.
That's really good. Beautiful. Outstanding work, you two. Brilliant.
I would say this time last year there were a number of them out there that could have been permanently excluded, and it's changed their behaviour completely. The number of incidents has gone down, the number of exclusions has gone down. Obviously they're not angels. There's still a lot of issues at school. They're not doing their work, they're not handing their homework on time, they still lack motivation in the classroom, but it's this coming out every Wednesday that keeps them really focused, and I think it saves some of them from really going off the rails.
Let's keep going, boys, come on! Every school in this country should have a course that's very similar. It's hands-on, it's hard work, but these boys can achieve because they're given the opportunity to achieve. And sometimes the negative downside is that other members of staff say, why are we spending so much money on the badly behaved? If we look at the cost long term, the cost of a prisoner is far greater than the cost of having one child on this type of course. It's the future we're looking at. It's about giving them a sense of belonging. It's about giving them a sense of achieving something.
As the government considers a new approach to behaviour in schools, it's likely that all of the strategies featured in this film will be part of the package. At Ninestyles, a hierarchy of consequences leads to the isolation room, the ultimate deterrent. At Drayton, restorative justice encourages students to accept responsibility for bad behaviour. At Dufferin, early years intervention in the form of a nurture group can nip problems in the bud. But many teachers believe the key to changing behaviour ultimately lies in the curriculum.
The national curriculum is very prescriptive, and it's always teaching to a test and competing in league tables, so you have to do well in your SATs, you have to do well in the GCSEs. And that's fine, but if you're a non-selective school, which Southfields is, in a very selective borough, you want to meet the needs of the individual child and not the needs of the mass of children.
At Southfields, they've introduced far more personalised learning. Anif and Aaron, both in Year 9, have been taken out of mainstream lessons for a whole year. Most of their teaching is in small groups, with an emphasis on English and maths.
How many support Arsenal?
Half.
How many support Chelsea?
25. It's not 30.
But perhaps the biggest change for teachers is that increasingly they will have to take direct responsibility for teaching good behaviour.
I think it's a good idea if teachers are enabled to take on this notion that not only are they teaching or coaching maths, science, literacy skills, numeracy skills, but they're also doing that for behaviour. Yeah, teachers need to become behaviour coaches.